Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for expanding food system education in K-12 schools. This is the last session of the Massachusetts Food Systems virtual forum. And we're so glad that so many people have been able to join us virtually. Of course, we would rather have been in person, but hopefully we'll be able to do that again next year. My name is Brittany Peats, and I work at the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative. I'm a program manager, and I work on reducing food waste, bringing local food policy councils together, and expanding food system education. And we'll talk a lot more about that in a couple of minutes. So this year's forum is an opportunity to look broadly at how the various parts of the food system intersect and support each other, how they sometimes put pressure on each other, and how all of your work can help the local food system to be more sustainable, equitable, and resilient. We hope that these sessions will add to your thinking about the issues we discuss, their connections to your work, and about how we can all work more collaboratively towards our shared goals. We'd especially like to thank our sponsors, and you can see all their logos here on the slide, that they've enabled us to keep forum registration free this year for everyone. Just the usual housekeeping. Please keep yourself on mute for the moment. Introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like, as people are already doing, which is great, with your name, organization, and preferred pronouns if you wish. Feel free to use the chat. And as you probably noticed, we are recording the session. All the recordings will be posted online afterwards, as well as some notes and resources. So if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or if you missed the earlier sessions, you can always go back and watch them. So this is, oops. So those are the previous forum sessions that you can see online. And then so I'd like to review the agenda for this session. So I'll give an overview of our project so far, the lessons we've learned and where we're going. Then we'll hear from three great speakers who teach about the food system in really different and creative ways. They'll talk about what they teach, how it's connected to curriculum, what their students learn, and why it's important for them to learn those things. And then we'll have a panel discussion. So please make a note of any questions that you have for the speakers as they're talking. And then hopefully we'll have time for breakout groups to brainstorm what this could look like at your school and what support would be needed. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction on what we've been working on. So our goal in this project is to expand food system education. And so when we talk about food system education, obviously the food system is huge and encompasses a lot of different aspects and people and activities, inputs. So when we talk about this, we're thinking mainly about four broad things that we want to make sure that students are getting access to while they're in school. So that would be education about agriculture, nutrition, food justice, and basic culinary skills. And so why is this important? Well, and it enables students to prepare healthy meals for themselves, understand where their food comes from, learn more about careers in the food system. So obviously there are a ton of different things that people can do related to the food system. So just making sure that students are aware of those opportunities. Understand that not everyone has access to healthy foods. I think that's really important to being an aware community member. And then feeling connected to the environment and the food system. So if we want people to kind of advocate on behalf of the food system or on behalf of the environment, they need to feel that kind of personal connection to it. So our approach so far has been to start by collecting information. Over the past year, I've done around 60 interviews with school-based and nonprofit-based educators. So learning how they're teaching food systems in their classrooms and kind of what their challenges are. We've also done a survey of teachers and administrators. And we've done interviews with organizations and agencies in other states to figure out kind of what's happening there and if there are any lessons that we can learn from those other states. And so the next step would be to kind of circulate some of the key takeaways. So right now I'm working on a report, which would include case studies, some of which you'll hear from in a little bit. as well as resources for schools of how they could do this in their own school. So that would include um, some lessons, some grant opportunities, some professional development. And it kind of speaks to a lot of the great partners that are doing this work currently. A lot of them are here today. So just making sure that these resources are really available to everyone. And then finishing the report with recommendations. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those might look like. So the next step would be bringing a coalition together. So finding those people who this is really important to them and their work, and making sure that they're involved in this process. And then advocating for change. Some of the takeaways that we have learned in talking with a lot of educators is that food system education is happening in so many different places in a school. So whether it's in science class, social studies, art class, music class even, it's happening in the cafeteria as well as in the library. So there are just so many opportunities for this really rich, hands-on, curriculum-aligned food system literacy. And some of the components of these programs that have really helped to make these a success include creative and dedicated educators, administrative buy-in, professional development opportunities, so enabling teachers to learn more about how they can integrate this into their classroom. Some schools and districts have paid coordinator positions, which really help. They're called different things in different places, farm to school, garden coordinator, STEM, but they really help to make sure that this is happening systematically throughout the school. Funding for materials, school gardens require ongoing maintenance, cooking equipment, food, paying for lessons or programs that come, nonprofit programs that will come in and provide these lessons to students. The community support, whether that's people on the wellness committee who are advocating for nutrition education, or people who come and shop at the plant sale, which helps to fund a lot of these different programs. But it's not without challenges, and maybe one of the biggest ones that comes up is that food literacy isn't listed in the standards and isn't on the MCAS. So sometimes it's hard to make the case that this is important to be included, even though we know that it is. So coordination of this program often relies on volunteers, whether that's teachers or volunteers, spending extra time to, maintain the garden or to coordinate the lessons or to organize the materials and get the food for the projects. As always, there's limited time in the school day. So really being able to make that case about the value of these programs is really essential to this. And then not having enough funding. Sometimes it's hard for teachers, even if they want to provide these types of lessons, to find really good, up-to-date curriculum aligned lessons. So making sure that those are more readily available. And then limited time for staff to organize and collaborate. So thinking about how we kind of move forward and what we do as a group. So potential ways that we could expand food system education include funding state or district level coordinator positions. As I mentioned, some schools already have this, so making sure that this is expanded. Expanding pre-service trainings. So for those who are taking courses to become teachers, our food system, it's food system literacy, one of the things that they're learning about, and how are they thinking about including that in their curriculum when they do get into the classroom. And then increasing funding for existing teachers. So how can they add that to their classroom? Making sure that food literacy concepts do appear in the standards in more explicit ways. Providing grants, obviously, for programs and materials, as well as those high quality lessons that we talked about. And then finally, encouraging more nutrition education goals and school wellness policies. So that's kind of a very quick summary of where we are in our project. And we're so happy that we've been able to talk to so many great educators about their work. And so I'd love to invite them to come and share a bit more. So I think we're going to start with Brittany. So if you want, I'll flip the slide and then you can tell us all about your work.
Awesome, thanks, Brittany. So anyways, my name is Brittany Borcher and I teach at Norwell Middle School and I am over the foods and nutrition program. So I've been teaching and working with food for over 10 years now. I am a registered dietitian, so that's where I started out. I did a lot of counseling with clients. I've worked in the hospitals, I've worked at food system education, I've worked in school food service as well. So I've done quite a bit with food before I became an actual certified teacher. And it has been so rewarding. I'm just going to say, being able to work with the kids at the middle school, because usually I'm working with people who have had a heart attack, but now I can tell them how to prevent having a heart attack before that happens. So it's actually been really great to teach these kids at such a young age and see their aha moments of, oh, this actually does matter. So I just started teaching there last year. So this is my second year at Norwell Middle School, and still getting my footing and getting a good program going, but it's been really good. I have 4 kids. I have a 10, 9, and 8 and a 3-year-old. So got lots of kids at home, and I see these, they're almost middle schoolers now. So it's kind of fun to see and teach those kids. But I love teaching about foods and nutrition. It is honestly my passion. It's what I went to school for. It's what I've been doing for forever. So being able to take this and talk to you guys now, even as I do every day, all day at the school, but talking to adults about it too is really fun too. Okay, so next slide. Um, a little bit about my program. So the food and nutrition program at Norwell Middle School is all 3 years. So they take food and nutrition 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I get them as 6th graders, and it's so great to teach them just the basics. So this right here is just like an overview of some of the things that I teach to my 6th grade students. We obviously start with the My Plate, and they get a little bit of it in elementary school, but really digging into it and having them look at meals that they actually eat and seeing what they might be lacking or gaining in the My Plate. This is an example of one of my students taking their food that they ate one meal and they put it on a plate. So this, I actually have them do it for like a whole week, but this is just one snapshot of their days. We do talk about food sources as well and where our foods come from. That's actually my first lesson, is like, where does our food come from? Which the kids are like, oh, from the garden, from the tree. I'm like, no, like, where in the world do they come from? And the kids are always so surprised when we talk about like food miles and seeing how far food travels and stuff. And it's a really good course for them to really realize, like, do we get things locally, do we get things from across the ocean? And that's a fun thing to see how many miles their meal has traveled to get to their plate. We talk about obviously the essential nutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins. They really enjoy learning about food labels instead of just staring at their cereal box every morning. They actually get to know, like, oh, what does this actually mean? So that's fun for them. And then we do food safety, which is huge. And then they do get an introduction to baking at the 6th grade level. I have them just do like, they have like 3 or 4 baking labs. It's not too many, baking or cooking, and it's just like an introduction for them. Okay, next slide. So the next ones are 7th graders. 7th graders, we can finish talking about some of these essential nutrients, and they get to increase their baking and cooking in the class. I've trusted them a little bit more. And so they get to do a little more harder baking and cooking things. One of the things I really like that I have the 7th graders do is this Foods Around the World project. They each get assigned a country around the world, and they have to talk about their food customs and foods that they eat and in that specific country. And it really opens their eyes to the different types of foods and foods that are available in different countries, and foods that might not be readily available that we're really lucky to have. But they also create a recipe. So you can see, let's see, this was one of my awesome kids. So he created a recipe from Lebanon. That's where he's from. And he made it the deluxe guide to deliciousness, Lebanese style. So he was really cute. But they made a recipe book and found recipes from a country that he was from and was able to share that with the class. And during non-COVID times, they're able to bring in samples for the class for extra credit if they would like. But that's not happening right now. We also do talk about like gluten-free and like food allergies in this class as well. Okay, next slide. So our eighth graders really kind of get to really come into food and nutrition in eighth grade. We do food cost analysis and meal planning. I have a picture here. Like I have them kind of pretend to be a dietitian for a day, and they have to develop a meal plan for someone. So this is like a 26-year-old man trying to eat more fruits and vegetables every day. And this is what one person came up with, and they have to link recipes. So like someone could actually do this if they were coming to them as a dietitian. So that's a fun one. They actually get to build some recipes, a lot more baking and cooking. We do have just one class that I've added for food justice that we started talking about, but I do want to make it more, try to incorporate it more in the class because I think it's not talked about enough. So it's just a quick course, like crash course on it in like one class period, but I would like to see how I can incorporate that more. Um, they do an advertisement for the My Plate, and then also we do a whole class on like eating fast food and eating at restaurants, and they're always very surprised by that class, but it's a fun one. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I do have a second part to what I teach, which is, so I am the family and consumer science life skills teacher. Uh, Last year they just had me teach foods and nutrition, but they wanted me to expand more on it. So I do teach some life skills, but I'm still trying to bring in some food to it because that's my passion. So we do still talk about like eating disorders in that class. We talk about how to set a table and manners and etiquette and things like that. And I actually have some guidance counselors coming in and helping me teach that class. The one I'm most excited about, though, is my food truck business class. So this one's really exciting. We have our eighth graders are able to, the whole quarter that I have them, they are going to create a business plan to start their own food truck. So we do have some days where they research different food trucks in the area, maybe where they can, what's wanted, what's lacking their market research. They design and plan. There's some menu development. So I have them create a whole menu of everything they're going to sell in their food truck and what it's going to cost, how much it would cost to buy these products, or how much would it cost to be local. Maybe they want to market to, oh, we're local, we're sustainable, that sort of thing. So they have to come up with all of this, and it's very guided, it's very directed to them, so I can help them along the way be able to be successful at actually creating this business. And then we do then let them choose one recipe that they're going to cook, and they're going to test the recipe, see how it goes. They'll be able to cook it a couple of times. And then the classes have a food truck war. So they all cook a food, and then different classes and different teachers come in with little tickets, and they get to choose whose foods they want to buy, and whoever has the most tickets at the end wins the food truck wars. So it's really fun for them. If you want to go to the next slide, this is some examples of like their little food truck things. So these actually aren't from my students because we're just starting this project, but I have the credit there for Mrs. Bollier. She is the one who I got this idea from. And she actually has like a whole thing you can buy, like this template. It's awesome resource. So if anyone wants that, just let me know. And that's where I kind of got my jumping off point for this project. But yeah, it's so fun. The kids are so excited about it. And I think it's going to be so applicable for them. And I think in general, just tying in with like everything that Brittany was talking about is I really feel like there is a huge need for this in the schools. I think the kids are such a great age when they're learning all this other stuff to just incorporate this food component, because it's something they literally choose to do 3 times a day is eat. And where are they going to get this food? What kind of food am I eating? Why is this important? And just really setting those goals for them to have really good eating habits now, and actually being aware of this so that they can make good and safe and healthy and sustainable, all those things that we're trying to do. There's so many things we have to do with our food, and I just think it's a really good to get into the schools when they're already learning from us, they're already growing. And I just feel so grateful that I'm in a school district where they have made this such a priority. I know that they were thinking about getting rid of the program multiple times, and I'm just glad that they've kept it around because I obviously am very passionate about it. And I just think it's been really great to be able to teach these kids. So yeah, that's Norwell Middle School.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brittany. That's a great overview of kind of how you're able to integrate different aspects of food into these food and nutrition and consumer science classes. So thank you. So next up would be, we have Haley Small, garden educator at Backyard Growers. I can flip to the next slide and go for it.
All right. Hello, there we go. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley. I am the school garden educator with an organization called Backyard Growers in Gloucester, Mass. It's the newest role that's been added to our team of 6. So a pretty small organization, very grassroots heavy. But my role was evolved from a food corps service member role. And now that I've kind of gotten to take it on and having like past experience as a public school teacher, and coming from that field of education, there's like a lot that we're able to kind of work through now that we didn't have the knowledge of when it was a service member in that role. And so Backyard Growers, as some background information, that's our lovely little mission statement. You're welcome to read it. It started in 2009 during the financial crisis by our founder, Lara. And she had the problem of she was unable to afford healthy produce like many families across America were, that she wanted to buy for her children, who I think were probably in infancy or toddlers at the time. And so what she decided to do was she ripped out her entire yard, which I think is about 1/8 of an acre, and she turned it into this like amazing garden. And it's still like to this day, like almost a micro farm of its own. And in Gloucester, for those of you who know our community, it's like very tight. It's like houses right up next to each other and everyone can see everything. It's very visible. And so a lot of neighbors saw her yard and what she was able to grow and do for herself. And they wanted her to teach them how they could do that because they were having similar problems. And essentially Backyard Growers was born out of this neighborhood community of people learning to garden, specifically to support themselves. And now it's about 10 years later and we're kind of in a similar world where another financial crisis is hit. And there's really apparent holes in the government social safety net, particularly around food and particularly in Massachusetts. We've experienced the highest relative increase in food insecurity across the country in this state due to the pandemic. And in particular, food insecure children has increased by 102% over the past 2 years in Massachusetts. And so it's looking at, again, like, okay, we're kind of now again at this crossroads of where we started and where we're continuing to go and how can we create long lasting change for a long lasting problem. So I'll be able to talk to you guys a little bit about what we do that tries to affect that change, how we reach people through gardening and how we are really working to create a more localized food system up on the North Shore. So what that looks like with all our good stuff that we do, we have community gardens, school gardens, backyard gardens, we do consulting, we have community programs, and we offer resources. So we come from a big philosophy of meeting people where they are. Gardening is universal. It's a really amazing thing to do. It's got so many purposes and uses, and anyone can do it. And so we don't like to have a specific pedagogy of like, you should be growing this or you should be gardening in this exact way. We're very much in the business of working with what people have because that's how we started. We also don't really buy into the doctrine of like, this is a good food, which is like almost like kind of that like dangerous territory of like food supremacy within, especially my role working with kids. And really, again, trying to meet people with what they're capable of at the moment. We support people to localize their food system and feel more power of choice in their food decisions. That's what we like to do, is really just empower people to see the opportunity that gardening creates. And we have a specific focus on maintaining the authenticity of our community supports and being true to the goals of centering people who are often disadvantaged to having access to healthy food. So that looks like 5 out of 10 of our community gardens are at low income developments, and a lot of people on our staff have spent time living in those developments. I know that yesterday I was at one of these sessions where someone was talking about how they were working in food access and are on SNAP. I'm working in food access and I'm on SNAP. So there's a real like true legitimacy to our operation that really is, again, able to like meet folks of every kind of walk of life and involve them in what they're capable of gardening. We do a multitude of programming, obvious from the slide. It largely just began as gardening know-how with Lara and her neighbors. And so we do offer just a lot of education to people who might not know where to start with it or have access to it. We, through the community gardens, we offer programming, the school gardens. Every single kid has 2 seed to fork experiences every year from pre-K to 7th grade. And they meet with me all the time. We do backyard gardening where we do wraparound supports for people, workshops, cooking classes. We just offer a lot of stuff and people can kind of pick what they want from us, which is nice. Specifically within the schools, because that's what y'all came here for. And that's my domain. We've trademarked our programs so that we're able to spread them further across Massachusetts, which I'll talk about on the next slide. That's anchored around 3 particular annual foundational touch points with 100% of kids from pre-K to middle school in Gloucester. So I work with about 1,500 kids, every child in our city. And so here are some of the lovely children whose parents signed off on letting me show them your face. Yeah, we do a lot of cool stuff with these kids and it's really flexible, which was huge for when the pandemic hit and things really needed to kind of get refreshed and reprocessed and people were rebuilding a lot of programming. We didn't necessarily have that because we have the outdoors and we have this kind of, again, like flexibility within what we can offer and how we can offer it. But to go particular into our programs with the schools, we have foundational programs, like I said, for preschool to 5th grade. We call it salad days and fall harvest days. So the kids plant salad, greens, spinach, all that good stuff in like March, April, grows for 2 months. They harvest it in June. We have big salad days celebration. And then they plant a fall crop. Summer happens. I take care of it while they're all away. And then in the fall, they get to harvest their crop and then we serve it in the cafeteria. We also are able to coordinate with specific farms in the region like Alprella and Cedar Rock to get local organic produce into the kitchens and offer it in conjunction with the school kitchen managers as part of the kids' lunches, which is really neat. Yearly, we grow over 1,000 pounds of produce in these school cafeterias, which the top left corner, that's some kids planting some spinach this fall. So it's really cool to see the school garden have a purpose because I feel like that sometimes a lot of the struggle is like, okay, we have this really neat garden space or, oh, we have like 2 garden beds out in front and we want to plant things, but what do we do with it? And so we're lucky enough to be able to grow enough produce that it serves the purpose of being put into the cafeteria and the kids get to be involved 100% of the way. And then in middle school, we do more targeted programming around food systems. And again, like focusing on a localization and shifting their kind of consciousness of food from like I go to Market Basket and get groceries to like the decisions I make have an impact beyond myself. So they get direct curriculum in connections to like science and social studies. They do a popcorn program in 6th grade, a wheat program in 7th grade, and we're developing and piloting a soil program next year in 8th grade, which is super exciting. And with all these educational supports and us being able to kind of be one of the groups that's gotten their foot in the door of schools, because it often feels like there is the school and there's all these people who want to provide these like wraparound supports to upholding a food system within the school. And it just doesn't, it just like bats against each other. And so because we've been able to get our way in, we do offer consulting through our model and we've expanded to over 25 schools in the state and it impacted over 15,000 kids so far, as well as working with other nonprofits and third-party providers to teach them how to implement our programs through like specific moods of like SNAP Ed or the healthy incentives program so that we're still trying to keep in mind like we want to meet people where we're at. Not every school that we go to is going to have like funding for the maintaining of a garden or funding for someone like me to come in and teach these kids all about vegetables. So how can we again provide services to prove that everyone is capable of being given the opportunities to localize their food system and make choices that are good for them. That's my piece.
Wonderful.
Sweet.
Thanks, Haley. Yeah, that was wonderful. And we can definitely talk more about some of the specifics of what those lessons look like later. Because I think the connections with social studies and science are really interesting. And with that, we'll turn it over to Laura Stamas from 4 Rivers Charter School in Greenfield. So
All
take it
right.
away, Laura.
Thank you. Brittany and Haley are doing such great work with those students. It's very inspiring to hear. So I am a high school science teacher at Four Rivers, and this is my 16th year. So I've been doing this for a while, and I have been really lucky to get to work with ninth graders in environmental science doing a whole, pretty deep dive into food systems, food justice as part of their ninth grade environmental science class. So if you go to the next slide, it breaks down a little bit more about that class. So all students take this class in ninth grade, and a main focus of the first semester is really looking into food and farming. And I'm really grateful. We're in Western Massachusetts. We have tons of access to so many local farms. And over the years, we've made a lot of great connections with local farms that are really pretty close to our school. So we could go to the next slide. So Four Rivers is connected to expeditionary learning. And so we do something called an expedition in food and farming in ninth grade. It's about 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the year. And in that 8 to 10 weeks, we do a bunch of these components of a learning expedition. So we go on farm field work. All of the ninth graders will visit usually 1 to 2 farms. One time it's usually with the entire class. We go to a farm called Just Roots right in Greenfield that's doing a lot of farm education. And then in small groups of about 3 or 4 students, all the students will go to one specific farm. And when they do their farm field work, they get to talk with a farmer, interview, take pictures of the farm, and sometimes do some farm work. It can depend a little bit on the farm they're visiting. When, after they do their farm field work, we also do gleaning service work with them. So our school has a service learning component to it, and we glean at we've made connections with some people who are really active gleaners in our community and really appreciate the help of 38 energetic ninth graders gleaning carrots or watermelon or corn. It really depends on the year. One of the really great things about gleaning is the students actually load all the food up on a school bus and bring it to our local food bank. So they really get to see the full circle, and a lot of conversations around access to local, organic, fresh food. The food bank talks to them about how much that's really wanted and needed in our community. They each do an agriculture research project as part of the expedition, digging into all different topics from looking at monocropping, genetically modified foods, some people who've done bees, beekeeping. There's usually a bunch of research projects they can choose from, and then opportunity for them to dig into research that they're interested in as well, if it's not not a topic on the list. We have some great role plays and some good debates that I have found from a resource that I will share. And we do have a school garden. It's so great hearing Haley's work with school gardens. I feel like we have really tried to figure out over the years what makes the most sense to plant and harvest during the school year. And right now we've been doing some garlic. Because that times really well with the school calendar. But we usually do like pumpkins and squash and some other things. Depending on the year, different things do better. We've had some parents involved in school garden volunteering over the summer, some years more than others. One of the things that we like to do is all the food that we harvest out of the school garden, potatoes, squash, corn, if we do have a bountiful crop, we usually give it back to those ninth graders to cook with, even at home. Sometimes it also can happen in the class. We also grow a lot of kale in our garden, because one of the lab investigations I do is around herbivorous insects and kale plants, where students actually make and test their own organic pesticides. And it's really fun to have like sort of an experimental test garden out there for them to work with. You could go on to the next slide. See some of the big ideas and guiding questions. Expeditions always have some big ideas. So we're looking at some of these. Why does sustainable agriculture matter? Can we feed a growing population with sustainable agriculture? Where does my food come from? I heard from the other panelists, people are definitely talking about that. Who is growing and producing food in my community? Do my food choices matter? What is the role of food in a community? What does food justice look like in a community? What is agricultural progress and what tools can we use to analyze it? Who is benefiting? And have profits surpassed in importance when compared to human rights or animal rights? My ninth graders can really get into some great conversations around animal rights. You can go into the next slide. Besides ninth grade environmental science class, there's two other things at Four Rivers that I don't teach nature class, but I just want to lift them up as an amazing class that exists. It's a elective class. You would choose it just like you would choose like art, music, technology class. One of the other options is nature. 7th through 12th graders can take it. It would meet an hour twice a week. It's outside all year round. They have built a beautiful permaculture garden with literally like hundreds of different plants, tons of fruit trees, nut trees. It's now been there for about 18 years, and it is very, very common to see students eating grapes and pears and apples and all sorts of things during lunch that they've harvested from these really amazing edible gardens. And in the winter, when it's colder, they do a lot of fire building and fire tending and cooking over a fire. And it's great skills. Students really love that class a lot. Next slide is intensive. So I have been involved with teaching intensives. We cancel all of our regular classes twice a year for 3 or 4 days, and students in 8th through 12th grade get to pick an intensive that they want to take. And these are just offered by teachers and change every year depending on teacher interest and student interest. And some intensives specifically have a strong connection to food and cooking food and are really all around teaching students some great skills. My intensive that I just taught this right before Thanksgiving was around mindfulness and somatic grounding. But even in that intensive, we cooked a huge lunch together every day. And it was so great. I was working with this group. I had a 10th grader who I was like, oh, we're going to make a big salad. And he was asking some questions about cutting the carrots. And in that conversation, he was like, I've never made a salad before. And I was like, oh, this is so fabulous. This is why I love cooking food with young people. It was so great. He made a beautiful salad. I think he felt very proud about it at the end. We were all eating it together. So I think that's my last slide. And that's all. Look forward to hearing some of your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you to all the panelists. That was fantastic. So hopefully I've stopped sharing my screen now. Wonderful. So now we have some time for some questions for the panelists. So we've already gotten some questions in the chat that we will definitely get to. So maybe I'll start with some of the kind of higher level questions, and then we can get into definitely some more specifics as well. So in thinking about these very different but very effective programs that bring food systems into the classrooms, what are some of the big outcomes that you see? It's often hard to measure what students are learning when it comes to something that's a little bit more hands-on. It's often not something that we test. What have you seen as being the really positive outcomes that you would share with someone who's kind of thinking like, is this worth investing in? Is this worth spending time on? What would be some kind of takeaways from that? Laura, do you want to talk a little bit? I think that we discussed a little bit about this on the phone, so maybe you could just
Sure.
start us off.
I taught ninth grade environmental science during the last 2 blocks of the day for probably a decade. So like from I'd have one class at 1 o'clock and one class at 2 o'clock. And man, if I could take those kids, outside and be out in the garden, it just completely changed the energy of that class. It was so great to see how different students can really thrive in different settings when you take them visit. I remember one time visiting a farm, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot of guts to interview a farmer as a ninth grader, especially usually we're recording it because they would take a transcript and share it with their entire class. And I love bringing students out of the classroom, out into the garden, because I really get to see a different group of students like excelling and thriving in these different ways that I wouldn't necessarily even know about if I was in the classroom every day. And it really can hook them and engage them into a lot of like deeper and more committed thinking and learning.
That's great. Yeah, so really the value of making those connections and making the connections to nature as well. Yeah. Haley, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think the past 2 years before I started this position, I was a 7th grade teacher in Salem, Mass, and I started teaching the year that the pandemic hit. And I think just kind of going from like a time where everyone was inside to now a time where everyone who's with me is outside, is just something I think about a lot. And I think about it in terms of like how many like just new experiences have children been denied in the past couple of years, if not longer, by like circumstance of their identity or prejudice or oppression from their schools or elsewhere. And so my role sometimes I describe it as just like, we're going to go look at neat stuff. Like it's not necessarily for the purpose of like some whole nutrition education piece I have for them, or like a big like to do about like plant structures and like co-planting. Sometimes it's just about like getting to experience something new and wonderful and like marinating in that, and like having kids just get to like be like in awe of the world around them, because I feel like sometimes they're so separated from that. And like more and more just fewer contact with like things that are like natural and real and like almost like magical. Yeah, so that's that's something that I think about when I'm like, why do I take kids out into the garden? Half the time I'm just like, guys, there's something cool out here, like let's go look at it. The other half the time it's like, you should have an understanding of the world around you, and this is how you gain understanding, is through experience.
That's a great concept. Yeah, inspiring awe. Definitely worthy. Brittany, did you want to add anything of kind of what your students come away with?
Yeah, I was so surprised that these kids actually take the stuff we learn in class and like take it home. I've had so many parents come to me and be like, my son is saying I have to buy 1% milk. So she's like, thank you for that. But like, I have a lot of my students go home and they talk about this at home, and they talk about it at the dinner table. They want to cook at home as well. So I offer extra credit if they ever cook or bake anything at home. They have to snap a picture with it, and then they write a little write-up about the recipe, and they get extra credit on an assignment. And I cannot believe some of the things these kids cook at home. They'll make like whole video productions of their baking, and they'll do like their own bake-off things at home, and they'll do it with their friends. And it's just so fun to see them just like working with food. And sometimes it's a fail. I'm like, that's fine. You're going to do great next time. And just having them feel comfortable like doing that. But that's like what the kids want, is they want those hands-on things. That's what they really take away. Like every day, Mrs. Borchert, are we baking today? No, I'm sorry. Oh, this is so lame. Like that's all they want to do is cook. And if we're not cooking, they're like not happy. But yeah, they want those hands-on things. Like I love that your guys' schools have gardens. Like that's one thing I really want to implement in our school. I mean, maybe when I have some more pull at the school, I'll try and do that. But I think that that's what the kids want, is they want that hands-on. They want that stuff that's actually like going to impact their life and see how it can actually make a difference.
That's great. Yeah. People love doing things that are hands-on. It's a great way to learn. And also when it's connected to their life. And I think that, we've definitely heard that a lot with, these, when kids are learning about nutrition, they're definitely bringing those lessons home. So that's great. Yeah, so moving on to kind of the less sunny side of this. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges to implementing this. That's why, not every school has it. Not every student has access to these types of lessons. So what challenges have you all encountered in implementing these programs? And then maybe after that, we'll talk about kind of what do you see as some of the fixes to that. So anyone can jump in. Laura, do you want to start again?
I could start again. It takes a lot of time. I am lucky that I put in a lot of legwork early on when I was like young and youthful and didn't have my own kids, to reach out to a lot of farmers and make a lot of connections. And now like I can like count on visiting those same farms every year with like a small group, without that initial legwork of like, I'm a teacher, this is what I'm doing, like, can I break? So I would spend a lot of time just outside of school, like planning and prepping how we're going to get there, who's going to drive students, the whole thing. And I mean, that's also, I feel like with all the parts, the school garden can take time. I think that having a supportive administration is huge. I think that having people who are paid at your school to help support school gardens is huge. I would say a challenge that we still have is getting more local food into our cafeteria. It's super inspiring hearing that Haley's worked with that. Even though we have a lot of food growing on our campus, it's still really hard to get it into the school lunches. So I think I could stop there. I'm sure there other people have some others.
Yeah, those are all great points. Yeah, and we've definitely heard that from other places as well, that it's difficult to get the produce into the school cafeterias. And I'm definitely not an expert on that, but I know that it is possible. Haley, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can talk on that a little bit, just because I feel like, and like I was kind of like mentioning this when it was like, there's like the school, and then there's all the people that like want to help the school, and like it's just kind of like a little bit like not clashing, but it's just like and being someone who's worked in schools and worked in kitchens and worked in gardening and seeing kind of how those like three interact, it's kind of like each one is like misjudging what the other one wants or can do. And it's all like, oh, I have this like wonderful crop of potatoes that I want to give to this kitchen, and I want them to be able to use it. And I want the kid, like they're local, they're organic, they'd be great for the kids. And it all sounds like a great idea. And there's no reason to not do it, except that if they take those potatoes, then maybe they lose their like Department of Defense funding for vegetables for God knows how long. Or they happen to get a shipment of a whole bunch of stuff that day because the supply chain is insane. And they have to use all that stuff right then. So the potatoes get put on standby, or they lose half their staff and there's no one to peel potatoes. And so it is a little bit like, from what I'm seeing this year and like getting back into the schools and being in this role of just like kind of having to reimagine what school looks like and what food looks like, and not necessarily kind of buying into like the desperate push of like, let's return to normal, we're back to school and everything's good, because it wasn't before, and it's definitely not now, but there's, I feel like, a bigger window of possibility now for things like that to happen. Trust is a huge one, just in general. And like Laura said, things take time, and trust is one of those things that takes time. my organization's been doing work in the schools for 10 years and people still are sometimes resistant to like programs we've been running for over a decade, just because they don't know me yet because I'm pretty new. But it's things like the fact that I've worked in a kitchen really helps me gain traction with the school kitchens because I know the serve safe things. I'm not going to be an idiot and like wash all the dishes in cold water and like ruin a whole bunch of stuff for them. I'm not going to like step on anyone. I'm less likely to step on someone's toes. Sometimes it's just that piece of like, you need to find more commonality with the people you're working with, whether that's people who are like in administration or people who are on the grounds, like doing the work that you're looking to try and help them with.
Yeah, that's a great point about kind of the relationship building. That's definitely come up because there is a lot of kind of coordination that's required, collaboration. So creating those relationships and understanding what everybody's kind of looking for. Yeah. Brittany, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm really restricted as to what I can do in the classroom. I mean, especially last year, we could not cook. So that was really hard. Even now, I mean, I still am not happy with everything because of COVID. The kids cannot eat the food at all that they cook. So I know someone in the chat was like talking about how a lot of stuff has been cut because of allergies. That's also a really big concern. I mean, I have so many kids that have allergies to any fruit that has like a stone in it, or I have kids that are allergic to strawberries or bananas and like things like that. And so a lot of the things I want to use or things I want to do in the classroom, I simply can't do it. Gluten is huge right now, a gluten allergy. I have to have like gluten-free flour in the classroom all the time. I have one student who can't even be in a classroom that has any flour in the air. And so like things like that, I have to completely change what we cook in the classroom for that one student because we have to accommodate every student in the classroom. And so things like that are challenging. And I think being a dietitian and having dealt with these kids like one-on-one that have these allergies and having a kid who actually has allergies too, like I understand the importance of it. But then there's like a lot of pushback from parents like, well, why can't we still do this? Or why can't we still do that? Or my kid didn't get to do this. I'm like, well, we had to make accommodations because we can't just leave anybody out. And it's hard. But the kids can, even now, the kids cannot eat the food they make in my class. So we made actually today, this morning, we made really delicious ginger cookies and the kids make them and it smells amazing and they sit at their desks and look at them. They can't eat them, but the goal is to have them take them home and share them with their families. And I think it's a good compromise right now with COVID because they can't eat in the classroom and they just kind of want to avoid it altogether at this point. But I mean, we're making things work even though there's issues. And I think that's the thing is like, yes, there's like allergies and stuff, but you need to find ways to still make those accommodations and still have these programs and still be able to do these things. Like it's so important as long as like administration people are willing to like make those accommodations, I think everyone can make it work, hopefully.
It requires a lot of kind of flexibility and planning. Yeah, it takes, which again, back to Laura's point, takes time. Yeah, so any kind of policies or resources or funding that would help you do your work? What are you looking for? What would make it easier?
More money. I hate to say it, and I hate that it comes down to that, but like, I can't do it without funding. And like, we're lucky enough where like our programs have been like a part of the school system and they're used to like paying the $40 for our like rainbow potato taste test that we're doing next week, or like shelling out for seeds. Like we have MOUs with all our contractors, like we're in good shape for that. But when it comes time to like, oh, would love if this garden had like a nice sign so that the kids know it's a garden, then it's splitting the hairs a little bit sometimes with people of like, is it really that hard for me to get plywood? And sometimes it really is that hard for me to get plywood, but that's one that's definitely tricky.
So funding for materials, also for like staffing, or do you feel okay
like,
on staffing?
I hate like, it's just because it's just things come up, right? And you have like this really cool idea, this cool plan, and then it's like, oh, but it's gonna cost like this much money, and anything we do with the schools is supposed to be paid for by the schools, and the schools are not interested in paying for things that aren't necessary. And I understand that, having worked at one, but it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think I mentioned this, Brittany, to you earlier, but I think it would be really awesome, just coming from an educator standpoint, that if there was set lessons for teachers to be able to teach that we know are correct, and we know are going to teach students like the main concepts that we want taught. Because I think a lot of times there's not a specific food and nutrition teacher, and then other teachers wouldn't even know how to incorporate like actual real nutrition information. I know I've seen a lot of food and nutrition people teach incorrect information in the classroom, and they don't know any better. I mean, because there's so much out there, right? There's so much crazy information out there. And I think trying to actually get the correct information into the schools is important. And I wish there was a way to like help people have that correct information. So I think, I don't know what the answer is there, but just like some sort of like state program that was like, here's like 5 core lessons you can teach on like this food security or on all these different topics. And like, these are some good engaging activities. Here's some set lessons. Let's get these to like every middle school. Like that you need to teach these lessons in your middle school. You need to teach these lessons in your high school. So like the state or whoever is like, this is mandatory. This is what the kids need to learn. This is correct information. Maybe it's like updated every year. And it's just something that like we could get all the kids learning the same stuff and they could all be learning the same thing. I think think like me personally, I would love that. I mean, just creating all these lesson plans all the time, like from scratch, and trying to find the correct, credible information is huge.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point about making sure that, you know, lessons are available and that they're up to date. I think that's a huge issue with nutrition information in particular. You know, the science does change pretty quickly, and you know, the frameworks that the state is working with for health were last updated in 1999. You know, they're going through the process now of being updated. So that's clearly very needed. If anybody has any resources that you've found that have been really helpful around nutrition education or any of the lessons that we've mentioned, feel free to put them in the chat, because I know that they exist, but it's definitely hard to find for sure. Laura, do you want to add something?
Sure. This came to me. I apologize if you can hear background noise. It is very, very hard to find a quiet place to Zoom. I try to twist the state frameworks to the best of my ability to teach what I want to teach with the local food and farming expedition, but it is tricky. And I think I use the ecology standards, and I use some standards from even earth science. There's human impact standards around climate change and monocropping. And I really try to align that expedition with the state standards, but I also do think if there were more explicit state standards around food justice and food system education, it would make it a lot easier for a lot more students to have access to this kind of learning.
That's great. And thank you. Mass Farm to School has a lot of great resources, which are getting thrown in the chat. So thank you for that. Wonderful. So we didn't get to all of the questions, but I think that we did cover a lot, and I do want to give some chance for people to think about what this would look like kind of in their own schools and what supports would be needed. So before we kind of break out into breakout groups, which we will do, and all the panelists will be in different breakout groups, so you're welcome to ask kind of more follow-up questions there. And we'll also have a Jamboard so people can kind of add their thoughts to that as well. But maybe if everybody could just take a moment to kind of think, absorb all these different ideas of what we've heard of different ways to integrate this, and think about what would this look like in your school or your community? How can you imagine food system education, having more space in your school? What would that look like? And we'll just give people a couple seconds to think about that before we divide up into breakout rooms. Okay, so now that we've had kind of a moment to imagine what this looks like, everyone, we made it back. Wonderful. Well, thank you. We had a great small discussion, which was fabulous. Does anybody else want to kind of talk about some of the great things that came out of their discussion quickly?
Yeah, I
Brittany,
can.
go for it.
I had two awesome people in my group. Anyways, one of the awesome members was talking about how she's part of the Green Team, which is funded by the DEP, and she literally gives free, like, you can just sign up for it, and they give like free composting stuff to schools. And so a lot of like the links and stuff we put on our Jamboard. So if anyone wants the links to that, it's awesome. And we also have someone from Green Village Initiative, and they do just kind of like exactly what our other member did, and they do school gardens and stuff, and it was really fun to hear from him. But what we felt like needed to change and happen is just we need more people in the schools to help with farming or to help teach these things, just really people who care, and getting the student body involved. Like especially with the composting, she was saying a lot of the students like will stand at the back of lunch and make sure the kids are putting things in the correct areas so that they can compost, and it gets them involved in it. And like we said, we all know that kids love to be involved. So I think we had some really good stuff on there. And yeah, are they going to have continued access to the Jamboards? That was one of the questions.
Great question. We'll do something with them for sure.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point of kind of involving the community in various different ways. And I think students, parents, we talked about this a little bit in our group as well, of different ways to create coalitions around this. So it's not just falling on one teacher to kind of carry this whole program. So thinking of, creating a school team or part of the school wellness committee, different kind of avenues to do that. Would other people like to add kind of some of these supports, things that would help support this work? Can I call on our panelists? Because I know that they were in different breakout rooms. Haley, anything from your group that you want to report back on?
I was with two lovely people from the Department of Education. And we talked and this just kind of furthered my whole problem of nobody knows what anyone's doing. Where it's nobody knows what the schools are doing. Nobody knows what the kitchens are doing. Everyone thinks they know what everyone's doing, but nobody actually knows. And it's I have no idea what the Department of Ed food people did. And they didn't know what I did until just now. And they told me that there's wellness policies at school. And I just remember wellness policies being a child of the Obama era and being Michelle Obama ruined my lunch because now I can't have fried hot dogs at lunch anymore, which is disgusting. But the wellness policy dictates how the kitchen, the parameters for the kitchens to serve food. And so something that can be included is something around localized produce. And where we're in Gloucester, we have I think 5 farms alone just in our city. So there is active access that can be made. And we do it when I come in every month with my little produce bag and have the kids try the stuff that I've made. But having that be a regular component and having that be embedded within the system of the food service is something I'm really thinking about now. For how I can worm my way onto a wellness committee and write some stuff into their bylaws. So
I love it. Yeah, that's great. Nicole, do you want to, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk a little bit about wellness policies and kind of some of the support that you all offer?
Yes, sorry, I had to go around and get my charger. My battery was low, but I am good to go. So yeah, it was great to chat with Haley. And what I was saying is that, for a lot of these things, there's certain requirements around the local wellness policy in order to be compliant with both state and federal standards. But the wellness policy is also a place for so much more. So anything, a lot of times I tell districts that you're doing around gardening or nutrition education or food literacy or things like that, it's kind of a place to kind of brag also about what you're doing. And to Haley's point, if you are looking to create goals around perhaps, fresh produce or procuring different foods or utilizing foods locally, that's a place where you can put those goals in and it kind of holds your district to that standard, because once it's been approved by the school committee, it's in writing and it's part of the policy. Another thing too is once the policy has all this great stuff in it, you just want to make sure that it's available to the public. So putting it on a district website or community website, so that way people are just in the know of what's going on in your schools and in your districts as well. I will go ahead and drop my email I gave to Haley in the chat. If you have any questions around wellness policies, or if you're unsure, if your district has one, or if you're looking to build a wellness committee. I know I've chatted with Brittany in the past too. Wellness committees serve as a great already existing team for you to kind of bring up some of these talks and some of these initiatives around, food and gardening and agriculture and things like that. But feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to provide any support or answer any questions.
That's great. Thanks, Nicole. Do you also want to drop the link to the Switch website in? I think that has some
Yes,
good
I would
resources as
love
well.
to. Yes, so we just very exciting, launched our own school wellness website. It's specific to Massachusetts. There are general resources in there on the local wellness policy, but also some stuff about school gardening. I will also make a note that there is a blog on this as well. So if you have anything that you'd like to submit, if you're a school doing something really great, Brittany, a lot of the work that you are doing in your classrooms, I think would be great for a blog post. Just check out the news that you can use section, and I'm happy to get that up on our website as well. So let me drop that site in the chat.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, of course.
Laura, anything from your group that you want to share with the group?
Sure. We had a great discussion in my group. We talked about updating Massachusetts curriculum or standards that haven't been updated since like 1999. Someone was sharing that are out of date and really need some revision with like the My Plate even updates. We talked about some challenges that existed before COVID, but seem to be exacerbated after COVID, where just teachers leaving and some like garden or farm to school, like education programs, having to reconnect with new teachers and students being like below grade level and that like impacting different programs like coming into the schools. Yeah, it was really a lovely group. And it's also just cool to hear from Nicole, because I feel like having a place for students to share their work is always like a really good motivator as a teacher to get some really like nice high quality work. So it's cool to know places that we could like bring student work and student projects.
That's great. Yeah, and there are definitely a lot of challenges facing schools and facing teachers right now. So not to minimize that or make it seem like this is easy, but yeah, definitely thinking about ways that we can support that. I'm going to call on you, Winton. Anything from your group that you want to share?
Yeah, we didn't have anyone who's a teacher right now, but we did talk about the challenges, particularly budgetary challenges, and that teachers don't have a long enough day, and that grew into a conversation about students also don't have enough time in the classroom, in the lunchroom to actually eat their lunches, and ultimately decided that the key was getting rid of the MCAS.
I'm sure we're the first people to think of that.
But I wouldn't say that in front of Nicole or anyone else from DESE. No.
Right. Wonderful. Any other final things to share before we close out? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. I think this was great to kind of workshop some of these ideas and hear what different schools and different programs, different agencies are working on. As I mentioned before, things will be, all the recordings will be up on our website or our YouTube channel. And yeah, definitely, I'll definitely reach out about this project as it moves forward. As I mentioned, we're hoping to get a report out with some of this kind of information that hopefully can be used. And then also trying to build a group of people that can advocate for some of these changes that we'd all really like to see. So I'll definitely keep in contact with all of you that registered. So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you especially to our panelists. It was great. Have a good afternoon.